Okay, we are going to jump into two tables of 2550 zone here on Ignition. And it does let you join two at a time. And we'll just talk about any interesting spots and general zone strategy. Let's get these tables a little bigger. Okay, I'm going to fold that. I think you can think about 3-betting pretty wide when you're able to squeeze, but you really, honestly, even in today's games, they're a lot tougher than they were 5 years ago. You don't have to do that much craziness. You can play pretty straightforward. You don't have to run any elaborate bluffs. You do want to maximize every opportunity you get, though. So when good spots come up, you don't want to just pass them all by. But just like, do you really have to 3-bet every time you have the opportunity to with 3-4 in the big blind? No. Pocket 8's not a great flop, but not the worst flop in the world. And he folds, so we take it down. 8-9 suited on the button is an obvious raise if it folds to you, and it's an obvious fold if it's raised ahead of you. So we'll play for about 15 or 20 minutes, and hopefully a couple interesting spots come up. This is interesting in that we have a player who's decided to open limp under the gun. And ace-high is often good here, but it's not a if I'm called, there's like essentially no turn that looks great to me. I am going to bet the turn because, whoa, no, I'm not going to open jam the turn. Because if he doesn't have a king, I think he would have bet the flop with any pair and possibly any decent draw. So, oh man, and I was going to raise the button. 3-4 offsuit, I think you can fold on the button, by the way. But you should be raising super wide on the button because you need to steal those big blinds when the opportunity arises. I will fold here. Right here, I usually punish limpers when they're in the small blind, but since he has $13, I am going to check because I don't want something terrible to happen, like I make it $1.50, he shoves, I have to fold away all my equity, and I flop middle pair. I am going to bet. I'll probably bet 2 streets for value and check back the river unless I improve, because it is so drawy. I expect to get called by worse. Now I would probably value bet the river. The problem is I'm not sure what hands he would call down with and call a river bet with. And the most likely scenario is what happened, which is that he gives up. Or he check raises all in, which is kind of a weird spot, but I think you can fold even for that small of a raise. I'm going to 3-bet. Gosh, you know what? I'm just going to defend. If it's suited, I like 3-betting a little bit more because you can flop just like way more hands that you can barrel with and continue with. And now I am going to value bet 2 streets. If it goes call, call. The diamond is not great. He called really quick. So I'm going to bet fold pretty small, about half the pot, and assume if he raises, he has a diamond flush. Oh, but he snap folds. I'm curious what he snap called with on the turn, but snap folded the river with. Because I don't think he would just like snap call ace high. And I'd also expect him to c-bet all his 9-10s and king 10s. Like you raise pre-flop, you flop an open-ended straight draw, and then you just check it back. That'd be very strange. This could be an interesting squeeze spot, but I prefer if it was suited for the same reason we talked about earlier. There's just more flops where you can continue with and have equity. 4-7 on the button, I'll fold, regardless of if it's folded to me. And I will fold here too, because I don't really want to overlimp. Gosh, it's really tempting. I am going to let that go though. Getting that price and being on the button. But it's just not a ton of amazing things that can happen with 7-3, even when it's suited. This is a pretty loose open, and I generally open almost any 2 suited from the button. But 8 deuce is probably an area where you could pass it by. Now I flop top pair and backdoor flush draw. So all things considered, pretty decent flop. and we win the pot uncontested. The player pool right now is only, I think it said 37 players. So we are playing with the same people over and over again. The problem with Ignition is you don't even get their names. So kind of Zone and Zoom poker in general is less based on reads, and on Bovada it is completely readless. You can't even have notes on a guy you've played a couple times with. A guy open limps the button. That's really, really bad. And so he just took 50 cents and threw it away. Very strange, but a lot of people don't know even the basic strategy. You'd think if somebody was into poker enough to jump the hurdles to put money on an online site, that they'd know the basic theory that you shouldn't just be like open limping, and you definitely shouldn't be open limping the button and zone, but some people just don't get the memo, or there still are players out there who are kind of just like, well, I'm just having fun. I'll play my style. I like to see a lot of flops. I don't want to play them for raises. And you'll find people who do weird stuff like that. Ace-10 suited would be a 3-bet. So this guy open limps, which is pretty weak. I am going to bump it up to 2. And small blind against big blind, I throw out a ton of 4 big blind raises. I flop the nut flush draw. We'll bet a little over half pot. This guy just 3-bet me. People 3-bet you light when you open from the small blind, but Jack-7 offsuit just doesn't have... if you have reads on people that they're 3-betting you super, super wide, you can play back with all sorts of fun stuff, but in zone, you don't need to self-detonate just because you want to be more aggressive than everyone else. And I'm going to fold King-8 suited. Looks like a fun hand to play, but out of position with only one person going to the flop, generally more bad things than good things can happen. Like you flop a king, or you flop top pair with an 8, and you feel that like you have to call at least one street, and you're out of position, so you can't dictate the size of the pot. You can't get value when you do hit. You get value towned when you are behind. Both of these are going to be raises. Queen-9 suited from the cutoff, and then a little squeeze 3-bet here. We'll make it 550, and we're playing effectively 110 big blinds deep. And 6-handed, I'm pretty happy to get ace-king in pre-flop. If you're behind, you're behind. But you've got blockers to both aces and kings, and you're flipping against everything else that'll get it in with you. And what just happened is one of the best scenarios. You pick up free money. I mean, obviously the better scenario is someone goes crazy with ace-queen, or very rarely ace-jack. And you get all the money in as a sizable favorite, or you get it in as a flip and win, which is also good. But all things considered, winning $3 pre-flop, 6 big blinds uncontested is pretty good. So far, I've been running pretty well in non-showdown situations. I've been able to steal blinds besides the small blind Jack-7 offsuit, which got 3-bet and I folded. I haven't had a ton of hands that I've opened and had to fold away. So nothing too crazy has happened. I don't think I've rebought on either table, but I've also not won any big pots. So it's been a pretty mediocre session. King-9 offsuit from the cutoff is a for sure raise if it gets folded. And 3-8 suited over here is a for sure fold if it gets raised. So this guy just open limped, and I am going to punish the limper and isolate him. A lot of good things can happen, assuming it gets through the big blind. He cold called, which is interesting. So I was hoping to isolate a weak player, but apparently I'm going to the flop 3-handed. And this isn't this is pretty good. I raise and I flop top pair. The bad part of this is I need to bet for value, and their calls aren't going to tell me very much, especially if the cold call, the big blind calls. We will go fairly big given the drawing nature of the board. Thing is, if I get check raised, he could be doing it with queen jack, a better king, a set, 9-10. I think I'm going to bet the turn and check back the river because there are so many draws out there I can get value from worse hands that I can't get value from on the river. Okay. I'm definitely checking back the river. I can't beat, even if he's like going for an ace-10 call down or something. I expect to see king-queen or something. And obviously he wasn't calling the river with queen high, so we didn't lose much by checking there. I think maybe against some players, but like I said, you're completely readless in zone. You could bet the river small, like a third of the pot, but I don't really see a great reason to do that in that spot. So this guy is less than 50 big blinds, which is frustrating to play against because you'll just like get stuck real quick. I'm going to check this back because if he check raises the turn, it's a complete disaster for me. Now, obviously, betting is good when, and I make the nuts. Well, not the nuts. Not the nuts. Straight flush. He doesn't have a ton of straight flushes, though. And we are going to just bump it up and hope to get called by a 10. He folds. Interesting. So he probably... I flop a set over here. That's nice. And what are the stack sizes? Okay, so I need to make a pretty sizable bet. Especially, I think I should have went even bigger because I want all the money in by the river. So, or as much as I possibly can. And it's really drawy. So that completes a gut shot. It completes the flush draws. I have a diamond blocking. So I am going to bet here. But if I get check raised, it's pretty gross. I expect him to have a flush, like the vast majority of the time. Like it's unlikely that he would check raise, like wait to check raise with like a bare queen. But you also can't just give away free cards, and you have a set. You want to be getting value for your sets, so you can't you can't live your life scared of monsters under the bed every time a scary card comes. You still need to bet your hands. You're allowed to bet fold. And poker's really the thing that a lot of people, it takes a while to understand is it's all about relative hand strength. It's not absolute hand strength that you're looking at. So a set of eights is, in absolute terms, a set incredibly strong. But against a range of hands where his most likely holdings are top pair or flushes, when you get check raised, especially if it's big, on that turn, your hand's actual value just plummets. So, yeah, sometimes he check raises big and you fold the best hand. Like he had two pair and he decided to wait till the flush came to check raise, which is, ridiculous. But for the most part, you're going to have the best hand. You should bet your best hands, hope to get calls from one pair and two pair hands, and until they tell you otherwise. And when they tell you otherwise, go through, the thought process of what are the likely holdings. First off, is it likely he would be bluffing? Well, probably not. He wouldn't have a pure bluff. Like, very few people would just... So I would usually try and steal here. 4 big blinds. Given his stack size, I'll go 3. Now, people who have like half a stack and haven't hit 5 more chips, I usually give them credit for being a fish, and I don't like to steal particularly wide because, one of the main key components of people playing bad is that they just call too loose pre-flop. So, So both of these are pretty loose openings from under the gun, by the way. Suited, I think both are very reasonable. Unsuited, you have to be very, very careful because what's going to happen, and it's happened on both tables, when you get called, it's often going to be from somebody that has position on you. I'm going to c-bet both. This one I flop top pair. This one is a little better. If they don't have a jack, they're not going to be in love with their hand or set. And now I'm going to... Oh, okay, this is actually kind of a fun spot because I can tell them I have a king. In reality, I have an open-ended straight draw. Now, if he flopped a set, he's going to punish me here. If he didn't flop a set, if he has like a weak jack, they might fold. I don't know what they had for sure. This situation's not bad either. So I have top pair, and I turned an open-ended straight draw. I am going to check back this river, though. And if he bets, I'm going to fold. There's just not much I can beat. Queen 10, king 10, 3, 4. Oh, okay. So he flopped a pair of threes and called and then turned a flush draw. I thought he just called with 4 high on the flop, and I was like, okay. So far, we've been playing pretty straightforward, and we haven't gotten into any sick coolers. That's rare. So this is tempting. There's a couple things that are tempting me right now. One is to call, thinking, oh, I got position on 2 guys. This guy can mess everything up. Or to squeeze and 3-bet, but I am going to play straightforward, which I wanted to do for this video, and let the 9-10 go. If I was on the button, I think there'd be a stronger argument for calling. I would love if this guy raised and everyone folded, because this is just the perfect stack size to get ace-king in against, and you don't really, mind at all. Okay, so this guy raised in the cutoff, which can be pretty wide. Since I'm out of position, I like to pick up the pot right away if I can, so I'll usually size a little larger with like ace-king and king-queen. So you miss out on value when they fold. Like if he would have called for 450 or something. Okay, this is interesting. So he checks. He thought for a while, and he's really taking his time thinking here. I think I'm going to fire for 350, and if he calls, give up the river. His most likely holdings are like a low 9, a low 8, or a draw. So I can't beat anything now. I'd be surprised if it goes check, check, and I see ace high. I think, like, obviously 10 jack got there, the diamonds got there. I expect him to bet both of those. I don't know if he would bet a 9 anymore. Darn, I was hoping he'd time out so I could just steal. Obviously I'm folding king high, and like I never ever expect them to fold a flush, even though the board is paired in a way where tons of boats are possible. But since I checked back the turn, I can't really rep a boat. Like I would never, I guess you could check back 8-9, hoping that the diamond and the queen would come. But I don't think he'd think through that. Plus, he could have a boat. King 6 offsuit from the button. I raise pretty much every king on the button, but if you want to fold your bad, offsuit kings and queens, that is perfectly reasonable. 2-3 offsuit. Definitely going all in pre-flop with this. Pocket 9s is a pretty good hand. We will raise. That's a pretty good flop, too. And we will bet. I want to get called by like ace highs and king highs. I don't think king high would call, but sometimes ace high will call. So I'm going to size a little smaller. I think I'm going to bet the turn. If I get check raised, I'll fold. People love to like check call their flop trips and then check raise the turn, and it's not a terrible line. Gosh, it's so weird. Something. I think I'm missing value by not betting like $8 here, but I am going to check it back. Okay. Interesting. So he didn't 3-bet jacks. When he doesn't check raise the turn, I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a queen. But I'm also pretty sure he's not just like going for some like 3 street ace high call down. So his most likely hands are pocket pairs. Now I expect most people to 3-bet jacks pre-flop, so that actually surprised me quite a bit. But I could see 10s. Oh man, I'm gonna fold because it's the straightforward play. But queen 9 suited's fun. If I was able to squeeze, I think I would consider a 3-bet there. So this board is annoying in that ace high is going to call you, any pair is going to call you, any 5 is going to call you, and you're never going to know like if you're able to bluff well. We'll fold there. But I see bet the majority. I've got 2 overs. No reason to believe that. Okay, well now I've got a reason to believe I don't have the best hand. And there's really no sense in like flat calling on a board like this with 2 overs, like trying to draw to a king or a queen or trying to like float and steal. Readless in a game like Zone. This one I would usually 3-bet if it gets opened. Since his stack size is so short, I'm just going to defend. And I think I'll float one and try and take the turn. And if he continues, I'll just give it up. But small blind raising ranges are super, super wide. Now, a super wide range actually smashes all sorts of stuff here. I'm going to bet $3 because if he has, nothing, he should be pretty happy to just give it up, which he does. This is okay. I've got a backdoor royal flush draw. I can get values from like king 10, queen 10. So I'm going to bet 3 streets. If I get raised, it's a little bit annoying. Okay, so that's almost the nut worst river. And I'm going to, so I've got the ace of hearts. So it takes a bunch of like flush combinations out. Oh, I guess I'll have the best hand when he snap checks. But king 10 and queen 10, which were holdings I was hoping he had, just paired up. Straights got there and the flush got there, so it's hard for me to get a ton of value. I'm going to fold that, sadly. It's hard for me to get a ton of value from worse hands. So a lot of times you like value own yourself, like you bet and they call. I just turned second nut flush draw with open and straight draw, so I will bet my equity. I'll probably call. If he check raises to like something reasonable, less than $10, I'll probably call. I am not going to fire a third barrel because if he has like a drawing hand like 6-7, I win anyway. And if he has like if he's calling the turn because he's like, oh, my 8's good or my queen's good, he's probably not folding the river. Yeah, unless I bet huge, like overbet the pot, I doubt he's ever folding queen jack. So he hit the 3 outer or whatever, and I just don't see him folding for any reasonable sized bet. So still nothing too crazy has gone on, and we're coming up on 22 minutes into the video. I'll probably play for like 5 more minutes and wrap it up, and it hasn't been the most interesting, but I think just some of the general concepts have been shown pretty well, and I try and play it in a straightforward way. Don't have to get yourself into any crazy spots. Like if you ever are getting into a bunch of hands where like you're thinking to yourself, oh, this would be a big call, or oh, this would be a big bluff, oh, this would be a big anything, you've probably messed up. Because winning long-term in poker is not about like big calls and big folds. In fact, you should stay as far away from trying to make big plays as you can. It should just be like kind of a constant grind where you're just grinding out and maximizing your value on every decision. So just like steer away from like putting yourself into spots where you have to make like big anything. Like, oh, 5-6, I could squeeze 3-bet here, and then I flop a 6, and I fire 2 barrels and check the river, and he shoves for a pot-sized bet. And you're like, oh, this would be a big call. Well, you could have just folded pre-flop. Or and yeah, like sometimes you're going to come off as really, really nitty, but like you should be really aggressive from late position. So like you should just be relentlessly trying to steal blinds from the button and the cutoff. And from early position and from the blinds, you should just, it sucks to fold your big blind when you've put 50 cents in and it's only $1.25 more to call or $1 more to call. Because you're looking at it, especially if there's like another caller or two, you're like, oh, I'm getting 6-1. I should call here. Well, okay. If you're really, really good post-flop, you can get away with stuff. But if you're watching this video, it's probably because you play these stakes, 50 NL, 25 NL, 100 NL, and you don't need to put yourself into a position where you're trying to like play catch up or like make sick reads. Like, don't try and make sick reads at anonymous zone poker because you can't do it. And like, if you get it right, you'll feel like a genius, and you'll just set yourself up for bad poker habits. So this guy takes his time and then limps under the gun. And this guy puts in a raise. Obviously, we're going 3-bet. In position, actually, I think I would like to size that a little smaller. And we're about 150 big blinds deep. So if he 4-bets, I am going to get it in. But I'm not going to be like in love with it. Because 4-betting ranges at the lower stakes are generally like... okay, So this is a really good turn. I'm going to bet something like this, and I will get it in. If he has a king, which is quite possible, it would not be great. The reason I check the flop is because the stack sizes are a way where I'm like too deep to just like love getting it in against a pre-flop raiser who defends against a 3-bet. So it's a little bit of pot control, and it's dry enough. Like there were no like big draws out there where I could just like check it back and like have a guy luck box his way into a gut shot or something, that I feel fine like checking it back. This is like the most beautiful situation in the world because they open, I love it, kings and aces. They open the button wide, wide, and then they oftentimes think that you're just like messing with them when you 3-bet. So I love having aces like in the small blind. Oh, this guy's got, let's min raise. This guy's got $2. We will bump that up. And he folds. So aces, 150 cents, nice. Kings over here, flop an overpair on a drawy board. We are going to make a sizable c-bet and get it in if raised, but they all fold. So there's like, and I talked about this in one of my other zone videos, I think there's like two really, really error-fraught schools of thought in zone that like bad players latch onto. And one is trying to out-aggressive everybody, and one is trying to out-fold everybody. Like, oh, I can just hit fold. Like, I'll just play tighter than everyone and make money. And I think maybe you could make a little bit of money if you just played really tight. But, I mean, you're so far from maximizing your earnings by passing up all the blinds and stuff. So you don't want to play just, like, crazy rock tight just because you can always hit fold now and like go to the next flop or whatever. And you also don't want to be the guy who's like, oh well, everybody raises light in zone, so I'll just 3-bet everything, because then you just get yourself into those spots we talked about earlier where like you have to make big plays over and over and over again. This board is when he calls, like his most likely holding, the vast majority of the time, is a queen, and people just don't fold, like, unless you like 3-barrel huge, and even then they don't a lot of the times. So like, I hope it goes check and he shows me ace high, but I expect him to have like queen 10 suited or queen jack or king queen often enough. $4 into 16. I am gonna look this up. Gosh, it's just like you're just almost never good. It's always like queen 10 or something. But he gave me such a good price that I did look it up, and thankfully I was good. But you have to be good like 25% of the time there, and man, it's close. Like I happen to hit that 20%. Here I'm actually in position fairly deep against the guy who made the 3-bet, but I'm just going to continue to play straightforward. I'm not going to get into spots with hands that have bad reverse implied odds, which king 10 and king jack offsuit against 3-bet, stuff like that. So it's been a decent session, and I think we're going to wrap it up. We're coming up on a half hour. I'm going to hit sit out next hand. I'm going to steal this blind and then call it a day. Or get 3-bet and fold $2 away, whatever you prefer. All right, so stole an extra 50 cents on the end there. So real quick before I wrap it up, I wanted to finish that thought I was talking about. The two spectrums of bad play when in zone poker, really in poker in general, but in zone, is like playing way too tight or playing way too loose. And I think it's totally exacerbated in zone because it's just so easy to play super, super tight because you can always just hit fold now, fold now, fold now, fold now, and you can just go to your next hand. But you're missing out on so much value that it's a huge leak, and it's hard to make it up by just trying to like set mine all the time. And I'm sure maybe someone can come along and like tell me I'm wrong and like you should just be playing super tight. I'd be interested to hear that though, because I feel like it's a huge leak. And then the other side of the spectrum, which I think is worse, are these guys you see who just like 3-bet and 4-bet every hand because they never believe anybody. Like, you know, whenever they get somebody raises the button, they're like, oh, well, everybody raises the button in zone. I'm just going to throw in a 3-bet. Oh, this guy 3-bet me when I raise the button? Oh, they always play back at button raisers in zone. I'll throw in a 4-bet. And then you get yourself stuck in these spots where, like, a lot of times people are going to have the best hand. It's really, really easy to convince yourself people are bluffing. It's like, I don't know if there's a name for it, but I always call it, like, the ace king hypothesis, where you just like essentially you put somebody on ace king no matter what, even though like that's only a small part of their value range. You're just like, oh well, you know, they don't have anything, they've got ace king. Well, if he has ace king on the head, so I call. Oh, if he had ace king on the turn, maybe he's continuing. And like people just don't continue to bluff that much. So like don't put your opponents on the hand that you wish they had. You need to actually think like, okay, people are more aggressive at zone. Some are tighter and some are more aggressive. Yeah, they're more aggressive at zone, but they still are not, like, their bluffing frequency isn't above 50%. Like, maybe it's close to 50% for, like, the super spazzy lag players, but for, like, a reasonable, even aggressive player, like, it's probably, like, 1/3 of their 3-bets are bluffs, and 2/3 are still for value. Like, no one in their right mind is, like, sitting in this game 3-betting every single hand. And if they are, they're not in this game for very long. So don't sit down at every table and just like assume everybody's bluffing every hand and start just spazzing off all your chips, like go on tilt and be like, oh, well, I've got ace 3 offsuit. Like if he's spazzing jack 10, ace is technically good, and start just like calling off all your chips or like shooting off all your chips for no reason. And when I played, like when I fired it up 2 weeks ago when I was first playing on Ignition, I was doing some stuff like trying to play back at people, just like assuming they were playing back at me as often as I would play back at them. But if you're an aggressive player, most people are playing less aggressively than you are. So just keep in mind, like, give people some credit and it'll make your life easier. Like, yes, you will fold the best hand sometimes. Yes, you will get bluffed. Yes, you will like get like bluffed by deuce 7 offsuit, but you're never going to know about it. You fold and you go to the next hand. Like, there's no reason to like sit and be like, oh, I think I'm getting pushed around by this guy. You don't know who it was. It's all anonymous. Like, that's not to say like, oh, just go back to the other spectrum and play too tight and never 3-bet. You don't honestly, you don't have to balance in zone. They don't know who you are. Like, as soon as you hit fold, you go to the next table. So you're better off coming up with like, okay, I will 3-bet these hands. I will squeeze in this spot, and like come up with some like heuristics or like rules that you're just going to follow, and just follow those rules instead of trying to level yourself into like, oh, he might be bluffing this time. Oh, he might be value raising this time. Like, just play straightforward, and things should go much better for you than if you try and do crazy stuff all the time. That's going to wrap up this video. I hope you found it helpful. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. If you want to play on Ignition, it's a really soft site. Technical aspects of it, not the best software in the world, but you know, they're probably improving. And it's fun. It's soft. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.